They didn't even bother to whisper. Donors in tuxedos and biotech fleece vests stood under chandeliers shaped like upside-down jellyfish, and one of them actually laughed when he read my badge. EMT? Cute. The hospital sends the help to its own gala now? I thought I was into this stuff. Boston is nice until it's not. But hearing it in front of Owen, who'd invited me as his +1, landed like a slap. He didn't defend me. He smoothed his tie, smiled that careful administrator smile, and said, "She's boots on the ground," like I was a pair of rubber galoshes, not a person who drags hearts back into chests on Route 93 at 3 a.m. I told myself to breathe. In for 4, out for 6. I'm good at swallowing things that burn on the way down. I kept my hands wrapped around a sweating club soda, because if I touch champagne, I might say what I actually think about men who confuse grant money with character. The ballroom smelled like money and lilies. And somewhere beneath that, the ocean, harbor air sneaking in through the service corridor. I grew up in that smell, diesel and salt and rope. Owen grew up in framed diplomas. That was the difference he never said out loud, but wore like cufflinks. He kept introducing me as Maya. She's with EMS. And people nodded the way people nod at traffic cones. Visible. Necessary. Not worth thinking about. I thought I could just float above it. Make it to dessert. Tell myself none of this matters, because tomorrow I'll be in the back of an ambulance making decisions that actually do. But then everything changed in a heartbeat. A woman 2 tables over. Pearls. Navy gown. One of those laugh. 2 loud laughers. Went glassy. Head dipped. Jaw slack. Her husband thought it was a joke. Gave her shoulder a little shake. And when she didn't blink, the table burst into nervous noise. I felt it before I saw it. The hush in the room, like a lung holding air. I was moving without thinking. Muscles remembering what to do, before pride could get in the way. "Call 911, I said. But I already knew dispatch would bounce it to a unit 15 minutes out, and that I was standing in a room stuffed with millionaires and not a single basic medical kit in sight. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. Skin pale. Lips edged blue. Tiny pinpoints for pupils. My brain went checklist. Airway. Breathing. Circulation. "We need to lay her flat. Now." A waiter froze. Eyes on his tray. The band stopped. Mid-song. People stared like they were watching a bad magic trick, waiting for the reveal that made this not their problem. "What are you doing?" Owen hissed. Low and tight. PR face. "Maya, this is not your..." "It is exactly my thing." I slid 2 fingers along her neck. Pulse thready. Breath shallow. The husband said, "She's fine." The way people say, the boat's not sinking, while their socks get wet. "She's not," I told him, and I said it so even that he moved aside. "Anyone have naloxone?" Blank faces. "Of course." A banquet captain near the bar caught my eye. I recognized her. Maurice, from a Thanksgiving pileup 2 years ago. She'd held a stranger's hand while I bagged his breaths. She didn't hesitate now. "Backstaff kit, storage room," she said. And she was already running in heels that had no business moving that fast. I tilted the woman's chin, swept her mouth, rolled her gently to clear the airway. She tried to breathe and couldn't quite find it. I remember thinking, you can mock my badge after she's pink again. Maurice slammed a dusty tackle box on the table like a croupier, popped it, and there it was, an intranasal Narcan too. Pack probably meant for the security team. "Good memory," I said. "You saved my cousin on I-90, she said. I don't forget faces." I loaded, sealed the device, and gave the first dose. Seconds stretch into little eternities when a room holds its breath. The husband started praying. Someone else started filming. There's always a someone. The woman's chest hitched. Once. Twice. Then a rough, ugly cough. The best sound in the world. Color seeped back into her lips, like someone turned the saturation up. She blinked at me. Confused. Alive. I rolled her, into recovery position, told her who I was, what I gave, what to expect, and asked the husband about meds, history, anything. He cried into his cufflinks. I kept my voice low and normal and boring, because boring is how you land the plane. The applause came like a late storm, awkward, then loud. That's the thing about fancy rooms. They hate being reminded the body is a machine that can stop. They need to clap to prove they're not fragile. I stood, palms sticky, adrenaline shaking the edges of my fingertips, and Owen tried to step into the frame like he'd coordinated the whole thing. Maya's with us at the hospital, he told a board member. We're very proud of our community partnerships. And I watched his mouth move and felt nothing but a clean, cool emptiness where his place in my life used to sit. I thought I'd be happy just to have her breathing. I didn't expect the aftertaste, a sudden understanding that I could save strangers in rooms where the person at my side would never save me from a sentence that starts with, "She's just." I slipped out to the service hallway because I needed air that didn't smell like lilies in judgment. The corridor was all concrete and stacked chairs and busted. Up carts, humming with the building's mechanical heart. That's where I saw him. Not tuxedo, not fleece vest. Dark suit that fit like it had opinions. Coat unbuttoned like he might run at any second and trust the suit to keep up. He wasn't looking at me the way the donors did, inventorying price tags. He was watching the room through the kitchen porthole, like the harbor itself was in there, and the tide was wrong. "Alvarez," he said, like he'd practiced the sound, like he knew the harbor too. I felt my spine rise a fraction. "Do I know you?" "Not yet." He glanced at my hands, at the Narcan still warm in my grip. His eyes did that quiet math people do when they're used to disasters arriving on schedules only they can see. "Nice work. You saved her without making a scene." I barked a laugh that didn't sound like me. "You and I were in different rooms then." "Damien Cole," he said, offering a hand like a peace treaty, but not pushing it when I didn't take it. He didn't smell like cologne. He smelled like cold air and salt. "Can I get you out of here? I have a car." I should have said no. Too fast. Too weird. Too something. But then he said, "The back way. No cameras." And my shoulders dropped because I was tired of being content. "I'm fine," I said, which was a lie, and he nodded like he respected a good lie when he heard one. "All right, I just wanted to make sure you got a thank you. That wasn't a speech about partnerships." He turned like he might leave it there, and that should have been the end. What I didn't expect was the way he said my name next. Maya Alvarez. Like he was checking a navigational chart. Like he'd been looking for one particular buoy in a black bay and just found it. I don't know why it rattled me. People at the gala have been saying my name all night. It never sounded like a map before. Owen found me then, breathless with performative concern. "You can't just take over a table like that. Maya, there are liability." "She's alive." "Yes, but optics matter," he whispered, glancing past me toward Damien. "Who is that?" "No idea," I said, and watched Owen square his shoulders as if you could grow taller by deciding to. He stuck out a hand at Damien with that dry smile he saves for donors. Damien looked at it, then at me, and something like amusement flickered. Quick, private. He shook, anyway. "Cole Maritime," Owen said, too eager. "We appreciate your support." "You will," Damien said mildly, and Owen didn't catch the shape of the sentence, but I did. I've spent my adult life listening for second meanings under sirens. I thought tonight was just humiliation and a save. I didn't expect to feel the floor shift, the way it does when a ferry passes and the dock lifts a little under your feet. I told myself to walk away. Harbor air sneaked down the corridor, and in it I heard my father's voice, the way you hear a gull in fog. Far, but familiar. "Don't let anyone tell you what you are. Meet ya. Show them. Then leave before they figure out how to use it against you." "Good night, Mr. Cole," I said, and I went back into the bright, loud room to find my coat, pretending my name hadn't just sounded like a plotted course on someone else's map. I worked the harbor that night because that's what I do when a room full of rich people makes my skin itch. I go somewhere. The air smells like salt and diesel, and I can hear my own thoughts over the gulls. The Fish Pier, at midnight, is its own world. Forklifts whining. Men in Carhartt jackets arguing about hockey. Somebody's Bluetooth speaker stuck on classic rock. Steam rising off vats where they hose the decks clean. I grabbed a large Duncan like it was armor and checked in with dispatch on the portable. Routine stuff. Diabetic check at the bait warehouse. A guy with a sliced palm from a fillet knife. One of the Dominican drivers panicking because his buddy's chest felt weird. Nothing we haven't seen. That's the job. You walk into other people's worst 10 minutes and try to make it boring again. I was restocking the rig when the first truck rolled by slow. Windows just low enough for a profile to show. Clean haircuts. Wrong clothes for this side of the water. Not cops. Not dock guys. The kind of smooth you only see in Back Bay. I clocked plates without thinking and told myself to let it go. But then they looped again. And this time, the one in the passenger seat gave me a little lafollette, like he thought he was charming. I hate that move. It says, "We see you." It also says, "We think you're alone." I'm not easily spooked, but I'm not stupid either. I radioed the watchman at Gate B, old Mr. Corrigan, socks cap, knows every boat and every lie, and he grunted. "Not our people," and hung up, because that's Boston. If it's a problem, it'll be a loud one soon. They made it loud in about 5 minutes. The truck angled across the access lane like a drunk's idea of parking, and 3 men got out, all health club tough, shiny boots that have never met chum. They didn't pull guns. They didn't have to. Their whole thing was theater. Take up space, crowd the girl in the Navy flight suit, smirk like you own the dock. The one in the middle said, "Hey, sweetheart, we're looking for a friend. Maybe you can tell us when you're off your shift." He let the word hang like a dirty dish rag. I thought about telling him to try that line at a firehouse and see how many teeth he kept. But I have a uniform to protect and a license I like. So I played the boring card. "You're blocking an emergency lane. Move the vehicle." The smile widened. He took a step too close. Cologne that didn't belong anywhere near Fish. My left hand found the mag light on instinct. My right found the radio. I could feel my heart rate kick like the rig's diesel. Not panic, just my body moving power to the right places. "Move the vehicle," I repeated, and behind them, a forklift operator killed his engine, which made the quiet louder in exactly the way I wanted it to. Harbor folks can smell a bad wind. I didn't expect help from where it came. A woman I only knew as Tui, tiny, fierce, runs a dockside stall, and that sells the best clam chowder, if you don't mind it, in a styrofoam cup, walked up with a broom, like it was a spear, and said in a voice that could split rock, "You boys will move now." She didn't look at me. She looked through them, past them, to the truck, like she could drive it with her mind. In another life, she must have organized a village. The men laughed, because men like that only know 2 genders, target and audience. But they shifted half an inch, which is all it takes to change a night. "I'm counting to 3, she said. And because I was raised right, I started counting too. Slow, even, with the radio pressed close to my collar, so Gate B and whoever else was listening could hear me not be afraid. 1, 2. They didn't stand for 3. They pivoted like a script told them to, saw something over my shoulder, and backed toward the truck with their hands up where nobody asked them to put their hands. I didn't have to turn to know who stood behind me. The night changed temperature. It wasn't drama. It was geometry. The way men who think they're in charge reorganize themselves when a bigger gravity enters the room. "You're done," a male voice said. Not loud, just final. And my stomach did this traitor's twist because it was him. Damien didn't yell. He didn't posture. He just looked like a problem they didn't have a plan for. And believe me, those guys had plans. The driver muttered something about a wrong turn, and Tua snorted so hard I almost laughed. They left, slow, like they were choosing to, and only when their taillights hit Northern Ave did I let my shoulders fall the quarter-inch I'd been holding. Twee tapped my elbow, slid a paper bag into my hand, sesame bun, warm, and said, "For later," like we hadn't just stared down stupid. "I owe you," I told her. "You owe me to keep doing your job," she said, and walked away, because some people don't need thanks written on a plaque. I should have asked Damien what he was doing on my pier, how he keeps appearing like he has my Find My Set to always. I thought my schedule was just my schedule, posted on the dingy whiteboard at base, emailed by a supervisor who still prints everything and puts it in those plastic sleeves. But Damien said, "You switch to the night car when there's a full moon," like he was cataloging tides, and the hair on my neck stood up because he was right. "Coincidence," he added, too fast, like a man who knows coincidence is a word you give civilians so they'll stop asking questions. "Or you follow me," I said. He didn't blink. "I follow problems," he said. "You're just where the problems seem to gather." It wasn't flirting. It wasn't even kind. It was honest, and I didn't know what to do with that. The black sedan parked by the bait shack answered one question and opened 3 more. A woman stepped out in a wool coat like the night couldn't touch her, hair pinned the way my mother used to for Sunday Mass. Not pretty. Exactly. Sharp in a way that would age well. "Maya," she said, and her voice had that old Boston iron my father never learned to imitate, no matter how long he worked the docks. "I'm Eileen Cole, Damien's aunt." I felt the little click in my chest. Cole, like the boxes that move up and down this coast without weather. "We don't do introductions like this where I'm from," I said. "We call, we ask permission." "We do when people we care about are standing in floodlights," she said, glancing toward the lane where the truck had blocked me. "Walk with me. Every training I've ever taken says, don't go off with strangers from black sedans. Every instinct I own said I wasn't prey in this story. I walked anyway, because information is a kind of oxygen, and I was short on air." Eileen didn't waste time. "Your father worked maintenance out here. I know, because my brother paid him to keep things moving when the city wouldn't. He kept records. The word records didn't land right. It stuck to my ribs." "Logs," I said carefully. "Timesheets." "Ledgers," she corrected, mouth flat. "Names, dates, payments, favors, things that make a harbor run when it shouldn't and stop when it must. We called them the harbor ledgers. Other people called them leverage." I tasted metal. I thought I knew my dad. I thought his secrets were small. Cigarettes. He pretended to quit. Fishing trips he called overtime so my mother wouldn't worry. Why tell me? Because men like the ones in that truck are looking for them. Because someone else will reach you with half truths if I don't. And because I respected your father. I wanted to ask how respect squares with paying off maintenance to keep ships moving, but my mouth was busy being dry. My phone buzzed, like it had waited for a line this good. "Unknown number. Don't open his boxes," it read. "Don't dig up what he buried. Graves Light is not a lighthouse. It's a tripwire." My hands did the dumb thing where they shake after the danger passes. "Who is this?" I typed, and the dots never came back. Eileen watched my face like she could see the letters. "People think information makes them safe," she said. "Sometimes it just paints a target." "So your plan is what? Keep me in the dark?" "My plan," she said. And for the first time, I saw the thing she and Damien share. This fixed, terrifying patience is to give you enough light to see the edges of the cliff. She pulled a small envelope from her coat. Inside was a photocopy of my father's old harbor ID. His picture, younger than I remember, and a scribbled note at the bottom in his angry block print. GL room key in lunch pail. GL. Graves Light. The lighthouse my father used to point at when we drove the causeway. The one he called our stubborn tooth. I didn't go home after shift. Home is where you cry, and I wasn't ready for that. I went to my mother's and did the thing I swore I'd never do. I pulled the dented metal lunch pail off the top shelf, where his stuff lives, with the rosaries and the tax receipts. The lid squeaked. Inside were the things that make a life feel held together. tape measure, the good screwdriver, a matchbox car I must have given him on Father's Day when I was 8. Under that, a key sealed in masking tape with GL written in faded Sharpie. I thought I knew what grief was. Turns out grief can add new rooms years later. My mother caught me at the table with the pail and the key and the photocopy. And she didn't ask why I had a black sedan on my pier at midnight or why my hands looked like I'd been fighting ghosts. She poured coffee and said, "Your father saved everything except himself." I wanted to be angry for that line, but she was right. "I think he saved something for me," I said. She looked at the key, at me, at the window where dawn was turning the harbor the color of a bruise, and nodded once like a judge. "Then figure out what it costs," she said, "and decide if you're willing to pay it." I thought Damien showing up was the part that would keep me awake. It wasn't. It was Eileen's honesty, and the text's threat, and that stupid key. Heavy for how little it weighed. I showered, changed, pulled my hair into the work bun I wear when I can't afford to have a single strand in my face, and packed to go. Bag like I was heading to a multi-car pileup. My plan wasn't heroic. It was simple. Start where the truth was supposed to be, Graves light, and treat whatever I find the way I treat a bleeding patient. Identify the source, control the flow, prevent the next loss. I don't know if that makes me brave or just stubborn. Maybe the difference is who's telling the story. All I know is this. I'm done letting men who don't know the smell of the bay write my next chapter. If my father left me a map, I'll read it. And if it's a tripwire, I'll learn how to cut the right wire without blowing the whole harbor up. The market hit like it always does right before dawn. Wet concrete. Forklifts whining. Foghorn, low and stubborn out in the harbor. Men in Bruins beanies arguing whether it's the year or not, while knives thump a rhythm on cutting boards. I was there because the nights feel shorter when I keep moving. Because I had a key in my pocket that scared me more than it should. And because routine is the only religion I practice. Check the rig, restock the O2, swap out gloves, wrap the bleeder kit the way my hands can find it blind. I was halfway through a Dunkin' that had given up on being hot when the air changed, the way it does right before something breaks. You can feel a pressure shift in your ribs if you work around sirens long enough. A pickup I didn't recognize edged along the loading lane way too slow for men who know the tide. Windows down just enough to show clean haircuts and gym muscles that don't know rope burn. Wrong jackets for this end of town. Not cops, not dock guys, not lost tourists. "Keep moving," I said to nobody and everybody, and that's when the first pop snapped the morning. People think gunshots are always loud. This was more like a hard clap inside a tin can, and then the hiss of a marine flare, arcing red and nasty into the stack of waxed boxes by stall 12, catching fish oil like it's jealous of fireworks. Someone yelled Kincaid, the way you say the name of a storm you've been pretending won't make landfall. Markets scattered. Men don't move fast until they do. And smoke took the world in one greedy handful. I don't know what you believe about fear, but I don't think it leaves. I think you just make a deal with it. The trick is giving it jobs. I gave mine 3. Get eyes on the bleeding, find cover, make people useful. I grabbed the big cutting board off the nearest table, like a riot shield, because plastic is still better than ribs. Shoved it into the hands of a kid I only know as JD, who runs deliveries on an electric pallet jack, and said, "You're a wall now. Stay on my left." He nodded, like his life had been waiting for an order. We angled through smoke that smelled like 4th of July and low tide. And that's when I saw him, Damien, down on a knee, behind a stack of lobster crates. One hand pressed to his side like he was trying to hold in a secret. 2 men not. His flanking with smiles that weren't happy. I heard the click of something that doesn't belong near breakfast, and time got tall and thin. "Hey!" I yelled at the men, because sometimes volume is medicine. "Ambulance!" If he stops breathing, everyone's getting cavities searched by Massport, and your boss will love that funeral. That bought me a half second, which is the same as an hour if you've trained for it. JD slammed the pallet jack into the crates like a battering ram, and we made our own triangle. The board, the jack, and a stack of ice bins. The cough that came from Damien was wet, but not the wrong kind of wet, and I told my hands to move faster than my thoughts. I slid into him under the board, fingers going where they go. When there's no time, shirt up, pressure on, eyes up. He was pale in a way that doesn't read on men who live in suits. The smoke turned him soft at the edges, but his gaze was sharp, taking inventory the way I was. "I'm fine," he said, which is what men say when they aren't. And we both pretended to believe him until I lifted his hand and saw a groove of blood hugging his obliques. Grazed. Deep enough to argue about. Not deep enough to be our last conversation. "Congratulations," I said, voice steady, because the room needed a groan. "Up. You get staples if you make it through the next 5 minutes." He huffed something that might have been a laugh if we lived in a different morning. "What do you need?" he asked, which is my favorite sentence. "Waterline," I said. And JD was already swinging the big hose off its hook because he grew up with uncles who taught him how to hear plans inside commands. Flood those boxes, kill the flare, make the floor a skating rink. People think chaos is unsafe. Sometimes water and gravity are the safest friends you have. JD cranked the valve, and a sheet of cold slapped the market. The flare hissed into an ugly cough and then died, steam rising like a ghost that got bored. The two men flanking us tried to backpedal and did the cartoon slip dance we were counting on. One ate concrete, and the other windmilled and grabbed a hook that wasn't meant for hands like his. I used the moment to roll Damien tighter against the crates and wrap a pressure bandage with the kind of speed that gets you side, eyed at competitions. "You're going to bruise like a bad fruit," I told him, and he said, "I prefer rare pears," like he didn't bleed like the rest of us. Another pop, farther this time, and a shout I knew, like a song, even through smoke. "Tui, angel of chowder," yelling from her stall in Vietnamese and English at once. "Shut engines! Shut engines!" Because she's smarter than all of us and knows that silence tells you where danger still lives. Engines died up and down the lane until the only sounds were water and feet and someone cursing in a Chicago accent that didn't pay enough attention in geography. I don't know why I looked up when I did, but I did. And there on the mezzanine, where buyers pretend to be birds, stood Owen in a North Face he doesn't deserve. Phone up, not calling anyone, just recording, framing shots like he was building a case or a story or both. He wasn't scared. He was excited in that tight, chested way people get when they can't feel pain because they're chasing a promotion. I felt heat in my face that had nothing to do with fire. The part of me that still wanted him to be decent died a little, and I let it. He zoomed, panned, and then I saw the angle of his wrist. He wasn't just recording. He was sending. That's a learned motion. Who gets it? Owen? PR thread? Someone with a badge who wants leverage? Someone with an Irish name who needs proof their message landed? He saw me see him, and his face did that slippery media thing. Concern applied like gel, and he mouthed, "You good?" like we were on the same team. I turned away because rage is loud, and I needed quiet to think. "Two more," Damien said under his breath. Eyes on shapes and smoke I couldn't parse yet. He wasn't panicking either. He was angry in a way that was cold around the edges, which is either useful or deadly, depending on who it belongs to. "Kincaid?" I asked. "Hired help," he said. "The voice that matters isn't here." "Story of my life," I said. And we both almost smiled because Gallo's humor is the bridge between strangers. A shadow lunged, and I didn't think. I reached for the nearest thing that could be a weapon or a tool and came up with a roll of pallet wrap. And the industrial kind. Heavy. Mean. I slung it low into a knee with the same angle I use for chest compressions, and the man folded like a bad chair. JD yanked plastic around his ankles and wrists, like a Christmas joke. And a fisherman named Big Al, tattoos like a tide chart, sat on the guy with the patient grace of a man who's spent nights waiting on cod. "Oh, should your ass," Al said, and somewhere deep in me a stupid laugh bubbled up. It felt good to let it out. It reminded me I was still here. In the back of my head, I was counting. Breaths, seconds, distance to the rig if we had to run. The smoke thinned. It always does once water does its job. And the world tilted back toward normal if you squinted. The men who thought they owned the dock decided they didn't. Not today. and made that retreat every bully makes when the math goes sideways. One turned to throw a last look that said, "This isn't over." And I gave him one back that said, "I know." I've learned to love that exchange. It's honest. I tightened the wrap on Damien and checked his pupils and the corners of his mouth for lies. "You need a hospital," I said. "I'll send a car," he said. "No," I said. "You need a hospital." And he breathed out through his nose in a way that said he knows how to lose small battles to win wars. "Fine," he said. "Your rig." "My rig," I said. And we stood together in fish water and hose spray, and the kind of morning you don't forget. And I saw over his shoulder that Owen had lifted his phone again, aiming past us now, over the stalls and down the lane, towards something or someone I couldn't see. He hit send, like he was lighting a fuse. I told myself to remember the time, the angle, the numbers I could read on the mezzanine pillar. People think the brawl is the fight. Usually the real fight is the paperwork you build after. On the walk to the ambulance, Damien's hand brushed mine once. Not a romance thing. Just a human balance thing. Weight shifting because the ground is slick. It still felt like a small charge, not fireworks. More like static that promises weather. "You showed up fast," I said, meaning more than the clock. "You keep showing up where I am." He looked at me, like he wanted to give me a speech, and then decided against it. "I follow problems," he said again, but softer, almost like he was cutting the sentence in half, so I'd hear the part he didn't say. I didn't push it. I had enough on sentences for one day. I loaded him, told JD to write down every plate he caught, told Big Al to get coffee because shock is a thief, and told myself that whatever Owen just sent is going to land somewhere loud. I don't know what you call that moment when a story changes shape. To me, it felt like when a wave lifts a little boat and you decide whether you're going to ride it or let it throw you. I shut the rig doors and chose. They patched Damien in Bay 6 because the ER was packed and nobody had time to be impressed. Staples, tetanus, fluids. The usual dance when a bullet kisses you instead of marrying you. I stood by the curtain because I'd brought him in, and because there was a part of me that wanted to see whether he behaved like a patient or like a man who thinks rules are for other people. He surprised me. He said please to the nurse, held still for the staples, asked if the tech had eaten yet, and didn't try to tip anyone, which in this city counts as character. When the attending cleared him, pending an hour of observation, the room emptied, and it was just us and the soft beep of a monitor that wasn't really necessary. Chlorhexidine in the air, the TV in the corner, stuck on a daytime judge show with the sound off. He looked at my hands, where dried fish water had cracked the skin near my knuckles, and said, "You shouldn't have been there." I said, "You shouldn't keep showing up where I am." And it hung there, a fair trade between two stubborn people. Then I told him what I tell belligerent drunk guys and scared teenagers and anyone who thinks I can be pushed. If you want me in whatever this is, we're going to set terms. My terms. He tried a smile that's probably closed 1,000 deals, and I cut it in half with one look. "No charm," I said. "Just facts." I told him, number 1, if I find the harbor ledgers, I keep them. Not copies. Not supervised access. Not some noble handshake where you promise you'll do the right thing. The originals go in my hands until I decide who sees them and when. Number 2, no leash, no trackers, no goons shadowing me to Duncan, no for your safety taps on my phone. You want to protect me? You protect the places I tell you to protect. The pier, my mother's house, the clinic on Gove Street that treats half the guys your boats chew up. Not me, like I'm a package. Number 3, your brother Julian doesn't exist as a rumor anymore. I want the truth, with names and dates, with what you let happen and what you tried to stop. If you lie or shave it to look better, I walk. And I don't walk quiet. He stared at the ceiling like the answer was written in the fluorescent hum, and back at me with that strange mix he carries, expensive and tired. "You think you can hold a city hostage with a stack of paper?" he said. Not mocking, just testing. "I think a stack of paper already holds this city hostage," I said, and my voice came out flatter than I meant it to, because my father's lunch pail kept ghosting the edges of my vision. "I'm not adding a chain. I'm choosing which lock it fits." He asked how I knew, There were ledgers at all, and I told him Eileen told me. Then I made something flicker across his face I hadn't seen yet. A pinch of worry that had nothing to do with gunmen or rivals. My aunt went to you? She walked onto my pier in a black coat and used my last name like a password, I said. She gave me more than you ever have. He laughed without the part where people feel joy. Of course she did. She thinks I'm my father, and my father thinks I'm naive, and both of them think the harbor is a chessboard with a few extra squares. Why would she go around you? I asked. Because she knows you're honest in a way you can't afford to be, he said. And it hit me as both compliment and diagnosis. And because she wanted an outside hand on the kill switch. I told him about the text I got. Graves Light is not a lighthouse. It's a tripwire. And watched him parse it like a tide chart. Then whoever sent that is worried you'll find what you're meant to find, he said. Or they want you to run scared and leave it to people who won't flinch when it's time to use it. I don't rip, I said. You were there this morning, he said. I know. I don't know if men like Damien are built for negotiation with women who aren't impressed. But he listened, really listened. And when I was done, he didn't counter. He nodded once, slow, like a man who knows when the price is the price. You keep the originals, he said. No surveillance. I'll put eyes on your mother's street without stepping on your porch. And you get everything on Julian from me today. Before you go anywhere. He paused, like there was a word he didn't want to say, and said it anyway. And if you need me, you use my number, not my people. It rings through. Good, I said. And the relief that moved through my ribs felt almost like the thing that comes after you shock a heart and watch it find rhythm. I still didn't trust him. He still didn't deserve trust. But we had a shape. Eileen arrived with hospital coffee like she was visiting a parishioner, black for him, extra cream for me because she pays attention in the small ways that matter, and closed the curtain with one finger, the way principals close doors before they tell you something you won't like. Graves Light, she said before I could ask. Has a service room no one cares about unless a bulb blows or a storm knocks the camera offline. Your father kept a galvanized toolbox chained under the cabinet with the old radio batteries. He wrote GL on the key because he didn't believe in poetry. She slid a folded slip across the tray. And in my father's block letters, there it was again. GL room key, in lunch pail. She'd known before she ever stepped onto my pier. Why not tell him? I asked, jerking my head at Damien. Because he's good. And good men think they can fix systems that were built to grind them down. You're not good, she said. And before I bristled, she added, You're clear. You don't worship the machine. You walk in, do the work, and leave before it claims you. It should have stung. It didn't. It felt like someone naming the exact size of my bones. Damien didn't argue with her assessment, which told me he's not as fragile as most. He gave me Julian straight. Dates. Shipments rerouted through shell companies. A list of overdoses the family accountants pretend don't add up to anything because they happened in zip codes no one in a tux drives through. He owned what he'd looked away from when he was young enough to believe there's a clean way to run a dirty business, and what he'd tried to shut down when he realized there isn't. He didn't cry. He didn't ask me to forgive him. He said he wants it to stop. And for once, it didn't sound like a line. I heard my mother's voice in the back of my skull. Figure out what it costs. And understood the number just went up. The unit clerk cracked the curtain to drop a packet of discharge papers and a HIPAA form on the tray, and shot me a look that said, You bringing trouble into my bays? I gave her the little shrug that says, It walked in on its own. On the TV. The judge hammered a gavel over a paternity test. And for a second, the absurdity washed over me. How American it is to hold life. And death choices under fluorescent lights with bargain coffee and daytime TV narrating your deals. I told Damien I'd take him as far as the parking garage because I needed him out of my ER before every camera in the city found a way to turn Bay 6 into a news set. In the elevator, he asked if I was scared. Yes, I said, because pretending otherwise makes you sloppy. But I grew up learning knots. You tie the right ones, and nothing you care about goes overboard. He held the door at the garage level and didn't try to touch me, which I appreciated more than I wanted to. We have an agreement, he said. We do, I said. Break it and I'm done. I left him under concrete with a cup of coffee and a bodyguard who thought he was invisible, and drove toward the causeway with the GL key taped under my shirt like a second sternum. On the way out of Eastie, I stopped at a hardware store where the counter guy still remembers my dad arguing about drill bits. Bought a headlamp and a pair of cut-resistant gloves and texted T to tell her I'd swing by later for a quart of chowder. Insurance against bad weather that isn't weather. As the skyline flattened in the rear view and the gray Atlantic opened up, I felt this thin, bright wire of calm thread through the worry. I'd set my lines. I'd named my price. Now, I'd see if the men who filled rooms with smoke could handle a woman who refused to choke on it. Dead. Lena Brooks picked Boston Common because she said it was neutral ground, which is funny if you know the city. Nothing here is neutral. Not the swan boats. Not the red line screech under Park Street. Not the bronze ducklings with their winter scarves. She wore a blazer that made her badge look heavier. Held a Go Cup, like it was proof she was just passing through. And got right to the point. Protection for information. Immunity for cooperation. And a soft promise that I wouldn't end up as Exhibit A in a case she was already building in her head. I listened because that's what I do in the rig. Let people talk until the real problem leaks out around the edges. The edge showed fast. She said it like a weather report. You're in over your head, Maya. And I heard the part she didn't say. You're useful until you're not. I told her straight I wasn't handing over anything until I saw what my father left and decided who deserved truth and who would set it on fire. She smiled, not kind, not cruel, just professional, and suggested a short walk to keep the cameras guessing. We cut across the grass, past a class of second graders, shepherded by a woman with a whistle and a voice that could stop traffic, and followed the Freedom Trail bricks toward the Greenway, because this is Boston, and we all end up circling the same blocks when we don't know what to do. I smelled roasted nuts and chowder bread bowls before we saw Quincy Market's stone columns, and I was thinking about the key taped to my sternum and the lighthouse that might be waiting to kill me when the day tore in half. The sound wasn't movie loud. It was a crisp, mean snap, and the kiosk glass to our right spidered out like a frozen pond. People don't run at first. They flinch. They freeze. They look at each other for permission to panic. And everything lands at once. The shout, the stumble, the second crack, and 100 strangers tried to fit through a doorway built for 4. I want to tell you. I did something heroic right away. The truth is simpler. I put my hand on the crossing guard's shoulder and borrowed her authority. Whistle, I said, and she blew it like God was asking. On me, I yelled, the voice I use on the highway at midnight when the overturned SUV still thinks gravity is optional, and we pushed kids behind the stone balustrade by the steps and got the teachers low and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, to make sure no little shoes were alone. A duck boat blared its stupid quack on the Greenway, and I wanted to throw something heavy at it, not because it was loud, but because it made the moment feel like a prank. Brooks was by my elbow, body at an angle that said she'd done this before, and eyes locked on the rooftop line above Faneuil Hall, as if she could will the bricks to give up a name. Stay down, she told me, which is hilarious. I stayed moving. Movement is control when you choose it. The third shot took a bite out of the granite bench where my knee had been a breath earlier, and Brooks dragged me by the jacket with the strength of someone who farms anger for fuel. He's shaping the crowd, she said, and that's when I saw it. The way the first 2 cracks had cut our flow away from the open plaza and toward a narrow corridor between the market and a service alley. Funnel and catch, not aim to kill. We'd have a body by now, if that was the goal. Aim to herd. Kincaid? I asked. She didn't answer, which told me yes. We needed to break the funnel. I grabbed a bucket drummer who'd dropped his sticks and said, Hey, maestro, give me cadence. Loud. Steady. Same beat. And he did. God bless him. Hands a blur. Something primal you could follow without looking. I pointed at the crossing guard, and she ran a whistle pattern like she was directing a parade. Left side move on the beat. Right side hold. We split the crowd away from the alley and toward open grass because panicked people follow sound. And if you give them sound on purpose, you can use it like a rope. A tourist in a Red Sox jacket, older, calm, stepped up without asking and took the rear, palms out, saying, "You're okay. Keep moving. You're okay," in the voice dads use at water parks. We built a lane with bodies and buckets and whistled rhythm. And for a minute, it felt like we might have stolen the day back. Then Damien appeared like he always does, not out of smoke this time, but out of the side door of a bakery, shirt tucked, face set. And I had that stupid hit of relief you get when someone you shouldn't trust keeps showing up before the worst thing happens. He didn't look at me first. He looked up, scanning eaves and HVAC boxes, reading angles the way fishermen read sky. "Not a kill," he said low, like a verdict. "He wants herded shots on the other end." "On who?" I asked. "Brooks," he said, eyes still moving. "They'll take the badge, not the bait. Kincaid likes a message." I watched Brooks hear that without flinching. She rolled her shoulders once, like a boxer. "You sure?" she asked him, without looking away from her rooftop. "I've paid for his certainty before," Damien said. And I heard a dead in it I didn't want to understand. Another crack. Higher. More echo. And the coffee cup in Brooks' hand exploded. Brown arcing. Lid cartwheeling. The kind of shot meant for headlines. Meant for nerves. She didn't drop the empty. She smiled with all her teeth and said, "Cute," which is either brave or reckless or both. I felt the twist of disappointment under my ribs, the one that belongs to institutions. You want the badge to be the safest thing in the square. It isn't. Not here. Not when the badge is running you like a chess pawn toward a square a sniper drew with a pencil an hour ago. I should have stayed out of it. I stepped in. "We're changing our plan," I told Brooks. "We're not going where he wants. We're going sideways." I pointed at the duckboat driver, who still looked confused in a hat with eyes on it, and shouted, "Horn in 3," and held up fingers. 3, 2, 1. He leaned on that ridiculous quack like it was a stadium siren, and we used the blast to pivot the crowd 90 degrees across the bricks. I grabbed Damien's sleeve, hard, because sometimes you have to be unfair to save time. "You said 2 men at the market," I reminded him. "There's a second angle. North roof line," he said instantly, and it hit me that whatever I am to him, problem, ally, obligation, he likes that I keep up. He moved when I did. The 3 of us, badge, businessman, EMT, cut the corner of the plaza like a triangle and pushed into the open where there was less to bounce sound and more sky to see against. The next shot never came. Either we broke the funnel or he didn't like shooting when the story didn't look clean anymore. Sirens rolled in. Multiple. That layered city chord I know in my bones. Uniforms began doing the late work of order. Tape, statements. The inevitable, "Please disperse," that sounds polite and feels like a shove. The crossing guard hugged 2 kids so hard their backpacks squeaked and then hugged me like I was hers. "You kept your head," she said. "It's the only thing that's ever paid my rent," I said. And it came out tired because I was. Brooks looked at me, at my empty hands, at the way I'd used a beat and a boat horn to outflank a man she's been chasing for years. And I saw something flicker that wasn't approval or envy. It was respect, lined with frustration. "I told you I protect you," she said, like the universe owed her a cleaner narrative. "You promised a thing you can't deliver in a city like this," I said. Not mean, just true. "But you can walk with me until we figure out who's writing the script." Damien's mouth tipped at one corner, not quite a smile. "Graves light," he said softly, and Brooks' head snapped like he'd said a slur. I didn't explain. I've learned some words don't belong to everyone. We left the square together because that's how you survive some days here. Not trusting. Exactly. But not alone either. And I felt the drum beat from the bucket guy fade under the sirens. A steady ghost in my chest to remind me I still had a metronome when other people tried to set my pace. The Zachem looks like a harp until you stand under it and feel the traffic in your teeth. and it's a metronome for bad decisions. We met in the shadow, because that's where Boston likes its deals. Under concrete. Wind off the Charles picking at your jacket. Sirens a few neighborhoods away, like someone else's problem. It wasn't my idea to be there. My idea was sleep and then Graveslight. But plans don't mean much when the people pulling strings decide tonight is a truce. Before I went, Brooks asked me to stop by a donut shop in Charlestown that still sells jelly sticks like it's 1992. She didn't waste time. She slid her phone across the Formica and hit play. Owen's voice, recorded cleaner than my conscience. Talking too fast, like he does when he thinks he's clever. You get me in front of the board for the cardio wing, Lena, and I make sure Maya talks to your people first. Not to Cole. She trusts me. He laughed at his own pitch. I can put her where you need her. Community liaison. Optics will be great. There was another voice on an earlier clip. Not Brooks. Male. Smooth. Southie vowels sanded down. Seamus Kincaid's fixer. I'd bet an iced coffee on it. You want the contract, kid? Then keep us posted when your EMT girlfriend is around Cole's docks. She likes playing hero. Heroes walk into nets. Brooks watched my face like she was assessing a crash patient. Before you decide who to hate, know this. I told him to back off last week. He didn't. He thinks he's saving you by managing the chaos. Men like him can't tell the difference between a plan and a leash. I tried to swallow, and it caught halfway. You using him too? I asked. I record everybody, she said. No apology. And slid a folded consent form across that made any of it less dirty. I signed nothing. I took my coffee to go. There's a point where anger stops being heat and goes cold enough to cut rope, and I found it somewhere on Rutherford Avenue. Under the Zachem, it felt like a Boston movie they'd forgotten to hire extras for. Eileen stood like a winter statue in a dark coat that meant business. Damien was all clean lines and steady eyes, except for the bandage under his shirt, which I could see because I put it there. Julian showed 20 minutes late with a smile that didn't belong to the family. His had angles. Kincaid arrived dressed like a guy who tips ushers to sit closer at the garden and thinks that makes him local. Malcolm Cole, the father, came last, carried by 2 men who'd kill for him and by the story he built with 40 years of not flinching. He had a stainless flask and a paper bag, like a dad at a Little League game, which would have been funny if the air didn't already taste like pennies. Gentlemen, Malcolm said, voice rough from cigars and history. We settle the lanes, or we settle the city. He looked at both sons, and I could feel the years between them. The one who wanted to turn the ships clean. The one who learned to love muck. He tapped the flask against the bridge support like a blessing and drank deep. The smell hit me even from 10 feet. Not whiskey. Something sweet under the burn. Eileen stiffened in a way only I saw. Her mouth made a thin line. Don't, she said. But it was a prayer, not a command. Malcolm smiled at her, small and sorry. Timing, he said, and I understood too much at once. People think poison is theatrical. In real life, it's math. Dose times minutes equals an ending that arrives when you told it to. Malcolm took the bag, a cheap red motel, room quality, and filled paper cups, passed them around like communion. Julian shook his head. I'm training, he said, which is a sentence only men who cheat on everything get to say without choking, and Kincaid pretended he was above it. Damien took a cup and didn't drink, which told me he was good at reading the fine print on people. They talked routes, like they were arguing the Sox lineup. Terminal 2 frozen goods, a new cold chain past the way station, a pilot program with a Providence warehouse. And if you weren't listening for the poison underneath, you'd think this was about fish and fuel and fees. It wasn't. It was about fentanyl riding in on someone else's ice and teenagers in Dorchester turning blue on floors their mothers just mopped. I used to think bad men hid their sins. Julian said his out loud, coded in logistics. We can increase margin if we standardize packaging through Kincaid's distributor, which is a bureaucrat's way of saying we'll make death easier to stack. I keep timelines in my head, the way some people keep playlists. It's how you run a code without losing the thread. Standing there, I laid our last month against theirs like transparency sheets. OD clusters spiked on Wednesdays when the Providence truck yard changed shifts. Shipments through Lane C doubled the week a city inspector got reassigned after a family emergency. The night we dragged a girl back at Maverick, 2 reefer containers claiming to be Argentine shrimp cleared in 10 minutes flat with the same crooked stamp they saw on an invoice in Bay 3. Sepsis doesn't kill at once. It floods, then crashes, then floods again. If you interrupt one valve at the right second, you can bring somebody back. I needed the right valve here. It wasn't Malcolm. He'd already decided what kind of story needed telling. He raised the cup like a toast, and his hand shook on the way down. I built you a city that could feed itself, he told his sons. I won't watch you feed it trash. He looked at Damien when he said it, and at Julian when he didn't. And there was grief in his eyes so heavy it bent light. He pushed his chair back a fraction. His face went a strange, gray calm, the kind you see in men who have already made peace with paramedics or God. He crumpled like a tower with its bolts cut and hit the concrete as traffic hummed above us. Indifferent. Chaos is noisy when it's fake and quiet when it's real. Kincaid shouted for show. Eileen knelt without ceremony, checked a carotid, because you always check, even when you know. Damien's jaw locked hard enough to crack teeth, and he didn't touch his father because there are moments touch is a betrayal. Julian stepped forward with just the right amount of alarm, the theater kid who never misses his light, and said, "Heart," to the air, like he wanted the word on a police report. I'm not a doctor, but I've watched enough departures to know when the leaving was planned. I also know that's the look a man gets when he thinks the crown just rolled to his shoe. Julian had that look. His phone buzzed, and he didn't check it, because he already knew what it would say. Later I saw it reflected in a car window. An alert from the hospital. The board moving to review contracts in light of recent events. Owen's fingerprints again. It's amazing what you can wreck with a favor and a microphone. Brooks came in from the far side with uniforms. A second beat behind, because she's not stupid enough to stand where the bullet wants you on round 1. She saw Malcolm down, saw the circle around him, and her face did the math in silence. Kincaid's guys shifted to make it look like they were ready to help, but their eyes were on the exits. Eileen rose slow like a tide and said in a voice that made even the bridge pay attention, "We're leaving. Call it what you want." She hooked her arm through Damien's, and that tiny grace broke me more than the body on the ground. Julian started to protest. "We haven't." And she cut him with a look I will keep in my pocket forever. "You've done enough." He dropped his hands to his sides, palms open, and the universal sign for don't shoot. I'm harmless, which is the funniest thing he's ever said without moving his mouth. I don't have a grand philosophy about fathers. Mine left his keys like breadcrumbs, and that was enough. Watching Malcolm make a clock of his last minutes, so his son would be forced to choose. Told me love wears masks. I'm not qualified to judge. All I knew as I stood there was that this wasn't a tragedy. It was a pivot. Blood under the Zachem sells headlines. A patriarch's heart attack sells stability. Julian thinks he's inheriting a ledger and a city. Kincaid thinks his pipeline just got 2 lanes wider. Brooks thinks she's got motive and opportunity enough to shake warrants loose by morning. Me? I walked back to my car and wrote the timeline on the back of a Duncan receipt. Providence shift change, Lane C stamp, Argentine shrimp, Wednesday spikes, Kincaid's distributor. The weak point wasn't the docks. It was the warehouse upstream and the invoices downstream, the stamp, the scheduler, the shift boss who likes Bruins tickets and owes his ex for 2 months of daycare. You don't bring down a flood by yelling at the ocean. You turn the valve and you wait. I texted Brooks 3 names and an address with a note. You don't get ledgers, you get this, tonight. Then I shut my phone, because men who hunt for trophies get sloppy when you starve them of bait. Damien called, and I let it go twice before I picked up. His voice sounded like gritted teeth. "He knew," he said. "He did it to make sure I didn't stall when it's time." "Then don't stall," I said, and my own voice surprised me with how cold it was. "I'm done being used as anybody's symbol. We hit the valve or we walk." He was quiet. Then, "Graves light at dawn." "I'll be there," I said, And when I hung up, I checked the tape on the GL key over my sternum like it was a second heartbeat. I'm not naive. Men died tonight, and more will if we get this wrong. But I've spent enough nights pushing drugs and blood and air into bodies that didn't want to stay, to know sometimes the only way out is forward. The bridge hummed above me like a big, dumb promise. I started the car, put the heat on my cracked hands, and drove toward the harbor, where the lighthouse waits with its stubborn tooth and whatever my father decided was worth dying with or for. Dawn makes the harbor look cleaner than it is. I borrowed Big Al's skiff because he trusts people who show up when it's ugly, and he tossed me a thermos and a flare, like an uncle who pretends he's not worried. The water slapped the hull in short, irritated taps, gulls yelling about nothing like always, and the lighthouse sat out there on its rock like a tooth the city couldn't pull. I kept one hand on the tiller and the other on my jacket over the GL key taped to my sternum, and I tried not to think about Malcolm Cole's paper cup hitting concrete. NOAA radio crackled a small craft advisory. I ignored because that's who I am when I decide. And 20 minutes later, I was tying off at the service ladder. Headlamp on, cut, resistant gloves tight, breathing like the start of a code. Slow, counted, honest. Inside, and the service room smelled like old salt and batteries, dust that never quite dries, and somebody's cigarette from a decade ago. My father's handwriting on my photocopy told me exactly where to look. Under the cabinet with the dead radios. The chain was still there, threaded through a galvanized toolbox like a warning, and the key turned with that sticky resistance that means someone planned for time. I popped the lid and felt stupid for expecting gold bars or a choir. It was what it needed to be. 3 composition books wrapped in oilcloth, a manila envelope bursting with receipts and shipping tags, a dozen index card stacks bound with blue painter's tape, and a Ziploc full of Polaroids that made my throat close up before I'd even looked. I sat on the floor like a kid at a library and opened to a middle page, because sometimes the middle tells you more about a person than the start. Names, dates, terminal numbers. A city councilor I've watched on TV shaking hands in Southie. Handwritten, next to a customs code that doesn't match anything legal. A judge's daughter's wedding gift list, with asterisks by vendors that exist only on paper. A union treasurer's favorite back door at a warehouse that claims frozen shrimp and unloads grief. In the margins, my father's block letters had notes like a coach. If X flips, Y backs off. If Y disappears, go to Z. There was a page marked when, not if, I'm gone. And I didn't make it past the first line. Maya, light is a tool, not a religion. Don't flood what you can fix with a flashlight. I forgot I was angry at him for secrets. For a minute, I just missed his bad jokes and his way of tying rope like it was a sentence he wanted you to remember. I heard him before I saw him, the soft scrape of expensive shoes on metal stairs. And because this is our life now, I had my trauma shears in my hand like a knife without thinking. Damien stepped into the doorway, coat unbuttoned, a white bandage's edge ghosting under his shirt where I'd stapled him back into the day. He stopped when he saw the books, then looked at my face instead of reaching. Good. Progress. So that's the city, he said. Not awe, not fear, just a fact that came with weight. I told him what I told myself. These burn a lot of people who never got a vote. I expected him to argue the opposite, to beg for discretion or spin or balance. He surprised me. And they let a few men pick winners with a pen. He sat on the floor across from me like we were kids, making a fort, and glanced at the Polaroids without letting his eyes linger where they shouldn't. What do you want to do? There it was. Not what should we? Not what suits me. I heard the day under the Zachem inside the question, and Malcolm's timing, and Eileen's clear-eyed cruelty. And I heard the other soundtrack, the one from the ER, where I learned you don't fix people by explaining they should have lived better. You stop the bleeding you can see. This is what I'm not going to do, I said. I'm not dropping 40 years of dirt onto a city set up to crush whoever's under it. You want to purge, because it sounds like justice. It reads like fire. Fire likes kids' apartments and corner stores. I tapped the ledgers. This is leverage that kept a balance. Ugly. But it kept a lid on worse. We're not lifting the lid to make a point. We're using the lid to trap the hands that keep reaching in. He nodded, the way men do when a woman maps a battlefield and they realize they'd brought the wrong compass. So, he said, we pull what's live, not the old embarrassments. The artery's feeding fentanyl right now. I slid the index cards to him like a dealer. Providence shift change, Lane C stamp, the fake Argentine shrimp run. A distributor with Kincaid's initials hidden in plain sight on invoices like a joke only monsters find funny. We extract just enough pages to prove this is current, I said. And we build a copy, close enough to pass a car check, not good enough to survive daylight. I looked him dead on. You hand the forgery to your brother and his friend in a place where they think they're winning. Brooks gets the valve upstream on a parallel clock. We control who gets which truth and when. And you don't hit public places. You don't make martyrs. And you don't tell me this is about balance and then use it to settle old scores. He took that like a man who's been hit before and decided to thank the punch for keeping him awake. I know a conservator who owes my aunt a favor, he said. She can do a passable period copy by nightfall. No seals, no real signatures, I said. If this ends up scanned by anybody who isn't in your pocket, I want it to fall apart. It will, he said. And if it doesn't, you'll make me wish it had. We worked on the cold floor. 2 adults passing names back and forth like kids swapping baseball cards. He wrote down what I flagged and didn't try to take what I didn't. Every time his hand strayed near a Polaroid, he looked at me first, like he was asking permission. And I realized something that should have scared me and didn't. He wanted me running point, not as a shield. As a mind he trusted more than his instincts. Outside, wind shouldered the lighthouse. A low boom that sounds like weather and feels like a warning. And for a second, I thought I felt my father in it, and the way you feel someone when a room knows their name better than you do. We're not partners because we like it, I said without looking up. We're partners because this is the only version where fewer funerals happen. That's the best definition I've heard, he said, and there was something almost like relief in it. When we stood to leave, I tucked the envelopes I'd pulled into the inner lining of my jacket and slid the ledgers back in the toolbox. There was a Polaroid on the floor that had fallen from the Ziploc. 2 men on a pier in the 80s. One of them my father with hair, the other Malcolm younger, laughing like somebody had just lied, and it felt like a friend. On the back in Spanish, my father had written, Nunca confíes en el mar ni en los hombres que creen que lo poseen. Never trust the sea or the men who think they own it. I put it in my pocket without explaining. On the way down the stairs, Damien stopped dead, and I almost barreled into him because I was thinking about my dad's handwriting. He held up one hand for quiet and tilted his head toward the little circular window that looks north. There was a gray shape out there, where no gray should be, low to the water, no running lights. Zodiac, he said. 2 bodies, one on comms. I swallowed the part of me that wanted to call Big Al and swear. Twee sent her cousin out in a skiff, I said, and the relief hit so hard it left a bruise. He'll flash if it's bad. He knows the difference between curious and hungry. As if on cue, a tiny light winked twice from beyond the Zodiac. A fisherman's code for, I see it, I see you, and I'm not going away. I felt my spine ease a notch. We're not alone, I said. No, Damien said, scanning the water anyway. We're not. That cuts both ways. He handed me the flare from Big Al's thermos bag, like a punchline that might also save your life. You still sure this is your plan? He asked. I checked the tape over the key one last time and looked at the books we'd put back to sleep. I'm sure it's the plan that lets me look my mother in the eye, I said. And it's the plan where your brother trips over his own appetite. He smiled without joy. Then let's set the table. We climbed into the gray morning with a copy to make, a sting to wire, and a city that was going to learn my father was right about light. It doesn't fix rot, but it makes it easier to cut it out without killing the patient. We chose the Black Falcon Pier because it's loud with trucks, and nobody asks questions if you're moving a box that looks official. The forgery rode in my backpack wrapped in blue painter's tape, the way my dad would have done a job he didn't trust. The real pages, just the live arteries, were stitched into the lining of my jacket with the same knot he taught me when I was 12 and worried about losing my house key on the swings. Brooks wanted the exchange at noon. Plenty of eyes. Like witnesses were a shield. I told her noon meant tourists, and I wasn't about to let Kincaid write his story on a family from Iowa. We split the difference. Late morning, gulls and longshoremen, security guards who've seen stranger. Before we rolled, I texted her the voice memo I'd saved, the one of Owen promising optics in exchange for access, and wrote, "This goes wide if you play me dirty." She sent back a single period. For her, that's a promise. Julian showed in a black SUV like it came with theme music. Kincaid, a minute later in a pickup with bedliner that still had the sticker on. Two men who try very hard to look like the class they're faking. Damien stood to my left in a coat that had survived too many nights like this and didn't reach for me, which I appreciated. Eileen didn't come, which told me she trusted the math. I kept the backpack in front like a kid on the first day of school and walked into a box marked frozen shrimp, product of Argentina, because our jokes are mean now. "Ms. Alvarez," Kincaid said, all that Southie sandpaper smoothed into TV voice. "Ms. Nothing," I said. "This is a handoff, not a brunch." Julian's smile was bright and mean and practiced. "We're all friends here." "Friends don't sell poison like it's a side hustle," I said, and I let the line sit long enough to bruise. The move itself was stupid simple. Open the bag, show the edges of a ledger that looks and smells old, let them take a quick flip so their lizard brains calm down, close it, seal it, and say, "We're done." The conservator had earned her favors. The ink bled where it should, and the oilcloth had the right stink. Julian did the cursory scan of a man who thinks he's smart and finds proof he's right in everything he touches. Kincaid tried to play it cooler, but I watched his shoulders drop the way men's do when they think a story just broke their way. "You never even thought to put it in a safe." He chuckled, which is how you know a guy has never held anything worth burying. "We're finished," I said. Behind us, on the edge of the loading zone, a bucket drummer I recognized from Quincy Market tapped a steady 4 on recycled plastic. Not showboating. Just enough to be a metronome for my nerves. On the third measure, he shifted to the count we agreed on with Brooks' team, right on time. Phones lit on the far end of the pier, and the world tightened. Providence PD hit the warehouse we'd circled the night before, and the one with the stamp that never matches the cargo, and fed an arrest photo to every agency in New England with the speed of a rumor. Brooks' text hit my screen. Valve turned. A beat later, another blast, and the shift boss who loved Bruins tickets had flipped. I didn't cheer. You don't celebrate when a patient's pressure blips up. You watch, and you keep your hands ready. Kincaid's pickup tried to roll and was nose with 2 state cruisers before it could pretend to signal. The troopers were polite about it, which is worse than yelling. Julian's driver thought about punching through and saw the SWAT van he hadn't noticed and made the only smart choice I've ever seen that man make: park and pray. What happened next will get written a dozen ways by people who weren't there. So here's mine. Julian tried to film his way out. He lifted his phone and started a monologue about harassment and small business. And Brooks, who'd walked up behind the troopers like she owned the cordon, hit play on a Bluetooth speaker. Owen's voice filled the pier. Greasy, eager, stupid, sure. Talking about how he could place me where she needed me. About board votes and optics. And then the fixer's line about heroes walking into nets. The longshoreman laughed. A short, hard sound that belongs at wakes. Julian looked around as if to make eye contact with the version of himself that's bulletproof, and didn't find him. For one ugly second, he lunged like he might grab me to get his leverage back. Damien moved at the same time I did. I went low, with the bad habit my high school gym teacher called scrap. Caught Julian's wrist with the cut, resistant glove, and he lost his balance on wet concrete and hit knee, first into the shrimp box like a punchline. No guns in the air, no hero shots, just a man realizing he'd misread the script. The troopers did their job. Kincaid went quiet, in the way smart predators get when they realize they're the ones in the trap. Julian said something about lawyers and hospitals and family. Eileen wasn't there to look at him. He had to look at me. I didn't give him anything back. I was already turning to Brooks. We didn't hug. We don't do that. She gave me the barest nod, like a medic passing off a stabilized patient. You get your valve? I asked. We did, she said. You get your ledgers? I asked. No, she said, and the corner of her mouth moved a millimeter. Message received. She read me too. You going to burn them? She asked. I'm going to stop carrying a city that never carried me, I said. Call it what you want. She didn't argue. One more thing, I said, because I'm petty when I'm tired. Owen? Internal Affairs has the full file, procurements on it. He's giving a press conference this afternoon. Good, I said. Make sure the bucket drummer gets credit before he does. She smirked. I'll FOIA that. The rest moves like end credits. Zip ties and tow trucks. A camera truck I didn't recognize idling at the curb. The bucket guy giving me a nod like we'd shared a weird dance. Twee texting a thumbs up, and a photo of a pot of chowder with "For your road." Damien stood next to me, without touching me, and I realized I wasn't mad at him for once. He waited until the sound thinned and said, I'm done. He meant, with Boston, with it all. I'm liquidating what I can control, setting a fund through Eileen for the clinics and for families who lost to our product. You can steer it or set it on fire. I'll steer, I said, and I believed myself. But you stay out of the decisions. It has to be clean. Clean, he said, and he made the words sound like a language he wanted to learn. I burned the rest of the ledgers that night behind my mother's triple-decker on a square of cracked cement where my father used to grill hot dogs like they were haute cuisine. It wasn't cinematic, no big flame, just stubborn paper that takes its time dying. Sprinkler hiss from next door. The neighbor's radio leaking a Celtics game through a kitchen window. I kept 3 pages, sealed, the kind of thing you use to keep men honest when they forget you have a memory. My mother watched from the back steps with a mug and said, He would have argued, then he would have helped you light it. We didn't cry. We listened to the game and let the past go to ash. I texted Brooks one line, We're square, and she sent back a period again. Eileen dropped an envelope in my mailbox 2 days later with the deed to a salt box in Maine and a note. Harbors heal at different speeds. There was a key taped inside. I laughed because I couldn't help it. We left on a Thursday because starting over feels better if you trick your brain into thinking it's a long weekend. Damien drove a pickup that smelled like coffee and rope, and I rode shotgun with a box of Narcan and a binder full of paperwork for the community paramedic program we planned to run out of a refurbished bait shed. The sign we painted ourselves looked like a toddler did it. Harbor Aid. Walk in, no questions. First week, we taught CPR to a fishing crew that swore they were too old for this and cried when the practice dummy came back. We handed out test strips and didn't moralize. We set up a fridge for insulin that isn't supposed to get warm. On Saturdays, I make coffee strong enough to apologize for the week. Sometimes at night, we drive the coastline with the windows down, and the only soundtrack is buoys knocking and the dumb comfort of classic rock. He asks before he takes my hand. I don't always say yes. That's the truth part. People leave out of fairy tales. Boston still calls. It always will. But the drum in my chest is set to a new rhythm now. Not a bucket beat that says run, not sirens, just breath. Some days I look at the 3 sealed pages in the safe and wonder if keeping them makes me part of the machine. Then I think about my father's line. Light is a tool, not a religion. And I remember who I am. If anyone starts shipping grief again, I'll open that safe. Otherwise, I'll keep showing up for the worst 10 minutes of strangers' lives and try to make them boring again. It's not glamorous. It's not clean. But it's ours. And for the first time since a night under a bridge and a paper cup that smelled wrong, I feel something that might actually be freedom.